I started Season 5 with Fireball Sorceress, and I'm going to be honest with you, it's been totally awesome. But 3 mythic uniques in, and way too many masterworking materials later, the build has not only come together, but at least to me, it feels complete. Sure, I could get a couple more perfect tempers, a couple more perfect masterworks, but at this point, I'd rather move on to something cool and awesome. However, when I made a season start video, I talked about my build as it was then, and I said if it changes significantly, I'd make an update video. This is that update video. So if you don't have much gear, you want to have a build to get started, absolutely check out the earlier video that I made. Since I finished the build, I'm going to be moving on to something else soon. And also, in the very near future, I'm going to come out with a video on the best modifiers to take in the Infernal Horde. So if either of those interest you, do be sure to get subscribed, leave a like while you're down there, maybe check the description to see if I've already made the video and put it down there. But for now, let's get into things. So first up, the build is absolutely incredible at AoEing things down. Even without much gear, you can blast Helltide and speed farm Nightmare 100s. So when you have really good gear, well, that AoE also gets even better. To a point where now you can not only AoE things in Helltides and Nightmare 100s, but also in Infernal Hordes. You might want to bring someone else along for the single target damage, but don't worry, if wave clear, that's going to be all on you. You hit your cut. You throw out some fireballs, which bounce, damaging enemy target, or clear an entire direction. And then, of course, anything that dies explodes to your fireball because of a fireball enchantment. The 2 enchantments that you use are Firebolt for the burn effect, since this adds quite a significant amount of damage and enables all the very fun while burning effects in Sorceress, and also Fireball because who doesn't like explosions? I mean, I guess people who don't play this build might not like explosions, but if you're playing this build, you absolutely like explosions. And speaking of liking explosions, personally, I recommend you turn damage numbers off because the sheer visual clutter it adds gets very annoying and makes it difficult to see boss telegraphs or enemy telegraphs in general. At the very least, I got tired of dying to screen clutter pretty quickly, but hey, if you really like your damage numbers, then by all means keep them on, there's going to be plenty to stare at. But what really took this build from feeling really good to absolutely incredible, at least for me, was the mythic uniques. I got them by spending a couple hours in Tormented Roads with some friends, and also getting pretty lucky. The 3 that I'm using are Tyrael's Might, which makes you feel super tanky because it gives you all max res and damage reduction. Ring of Starless Skies, which adds a whole bunch of crit and also a stacking damage bonus / resource cost reduction. And Harlequin Crest, aka Shaco, which gives a massive amount of cooldown reduction so that you can spam all of your defensive buttons, on top of giving a damage reduction, on top of giving some damage because it adds +4 ranks to all skills. And so when everything comes together, number 1, having the Shaco makes it much easier to maintain your defensive skills. This feels really good. Number 2, Tyrael's Might means even if you forget to hit the button, there's a chance you won't instantly be one-shot. Then 3, Ring of Starless Skies makes up for some of the offensive stats lost elsewhere, while also making it literally impossible to mess up your mana. But while the build feels really good, and I regret nothing, no build is perfect. This is a good starter. It'll get you farming, it'll get you uniques, it'll kill tormented bosses. But the single target damage is a bit lacking in late endgame content. Which means when I was getting to higher pit levels, and when I was doing Compass 8s, things were just way too tanky, it was taking too long, and I found myself dying to mistakes because of how long the fight went on for. Though of course, that is reflective of the balance in Season 5. If you're watching this video in Season 8 and the build's still around, who knows, maybe it could be the best build in the world for single target damage. Always take that kind of thing with just a little bit of a grain of salt, unless you're watching the video right after it came out. And so with that said, it's time to get into some of the choices that I made for the skills, Paragon, gearing, and legendary aspects. All 3 of them. All right, first up, Firebolt. I'm actually using the enchant, so the points don't feel like a complete waste, even though they kind of sort of are with the 4 ranks from Shaco. But hey, you have to put 2 points into basic skills to unlock core skills, so that's exactly what I'm going to do. Speaking of core skills, as many ranks into Fireball as possible, and I've gone over into Destructive Fireball. Honestly, throughout the course of playing this build, I've gone back and forth between Greater Fireball and Destructive Fireball, just kind of going by feel. Destructive Fireball started feeling better once I put on the Shaco. And then down here, Devastation to get Elemental Dominance, a nice little damage multiplier. Also, Potent Warding, specifically from a ring, does not do that much, since I'm already getting so much max res from materials. It is very nice to use before you get materials. Coming down here, defensive skills. Without Shaco, you'll want to put 1 point into Flame Shield. Then as many points as possible to teleport, hence why it's rank 9. Teleport feels really, really good with shimmering, and it gives you a reliable source of damage reduction. This will absolutely help to keep you alive. Same with ice armor, another reliable source of damage reduction with a snow veiled aspect. And honestly, shimmering ice armor, MVP for reducing cooldowns because you spend so much mana and you get it back so quickly. Still 1 point in elemental attunement, still 3 points in glass cannon from the multipliers, but the astute among you may have noticed I dropped Frost Nova. I dropped it for something really interesting down here. I've continued to take Align the Elements, Mana Shield, and Protection, the nice defensive talents that feel like they're part of a core sorcerer build at this point. I solved the problem of keeping Talrasha stacked through Ice Blades and Lightning Spear. Ice Blades is really, really reliable. Technically, it does also add Vulnerable, though I happen to have a lucky hit on my neck, so I didn't really need the extra Vulnerable. But if you don't have it on the neck, the Vulnerable will help. Lightning Spear is yet another vulnerable source, but also it's a stun source which does help to do a significant amount of stagger buildup on bosses. These two things mean that anything that says, hey, you have to deal fire, cold, and lightning damage is basically up 100% of the time with very little effort required on my part, especially because with Shaco, the cooldown is so low on both of these things. It lets me come down here and take Electrocution, which is a very reliable damage reduction. Also coming back here, yes, I'm still taking Icy Veil, because having barriers up, especially this barrier, is really nice. And then Inner Flames, Pyromancy skills deal damage while you're healthy. Well, all the barriers keep me healthy, so 12% free damage. Devouring Blaze finally got on an amulet. It's a nice 70% bonus against crowd-controlled enemies. And Crippling Flames to add another crowd control to the build on a lucky hit. And then, I've already explained this, but Fiery Surge gives a little mana regen. Realistically, I'm just taking it to get stuff behind it, specifically Soulfire. The less mana does not do that much for me anymore, but the up to 12% increased damage, very, very nice. And then last up, I have Warmth as a temper. It gives a good amount of life regen, helps keep my health stable. Last up, Etsu's Ferocity for the good old critical strike damage and critical strike chance. This combined with some of my other bonuses is why my crit chance is as high as it is. You know, actually, I haven't checked that recently. With all the tempers, I might be closer to 90% than 80%. Unfortunately, the tooltip for your crit loves to lie. Like, this says 65.3, but it's actually like 65.3 plus the 10% from Etsu's, which isn't active in town, so 75.3, plus another 12% from the Paragon board, which is now about 87. So yeah, pretty close to 90 now that I hit a couple of my tempers. Now for a Paragon board, I basically just copied what Northware had over on Maxroll. So let's go through it. Starting board, Elementalist. This is a 15% multiplicative damage since you get 5% from fire, 5% from cold, 5% from lightning. Fireball, Ice Blades, Lightning Spear. Stack all three, keep them up every 10 seconds, very easily with Shaco. Second board is Searing Heat. This bonus is capped at 60%. This is also where the 12% crit strike that I mentioned earlier is coming from. And here, Pyromaniac. For a while, I preferred the burst from the control glyph, but now that my damage is so much better, I think the stable 10% bonus from Pyromaniac does outperform it. We have third board, Enchantment Master, with Reinforced. 15% damage reduction while you have an active barrier, which should be 15% damage reduction all the time, since you get a barrier from either using a defensive skill or using any cooldown. And outside of Fireball, all your buttons are cooldowns. Fourth up, Frigid Fate. I've now capped this bonus out. I just needed a little bit more non-physical damage, which I took care of via Masterworking. And I'm still using the Exploit glyph for the dealing damage to a vulnerable enemy, which is always permanently stacked up to 10. Then, fifth, Burning Instinct, where I have Tactician. 10% increased damage for 4 seconds after casting a defensive skill. The duration is increased by 4 seconds because I don't have one defensive skill on my bar. That is Ice Nova. This is something that's actually really nice about not running Ice Nova. I get 8 seconds on the Tactician bonus, and then I just rotate between Teleport and Fire Shield and Ice Shield, and have this up 100% of the time anyway, so I probably don't even need the 4 seconds. The 6th board is Ceaseless Conduit, which is really just a travel board. The last 2 are really just travel boards. Here I have Destruction for the very nice 12% multiplicative damage, since at around 90% crit, enemies are going to be taking all the crits to take all the damage. Last up, Static Surge, same as before, with Flame Feeder, same as before, for the 10% increased damage to burning enemies. The Firebolt enchant means enemies are always burning. So now, let's look at some gear. First up, the good old Shaco. Your goal here should be to get at least 2 tempers on cooldown reduction. This feels really, really good because it massively lowers the cooldown of all the defensive skills. Just for example, Flame Shield, 10.83 seconds. Ice Armor, 10.83. Teleport, 5.46. And now, 10.19. 17.76. It basically cuts the cooldown in half between the cooldown reduction and the extra skill ranks, though the extra skill ranks is specific to Teleport. And I need to put Flame Shield back on my bar. Then Tyrael's Might. It's a massive amount of all-res and a massive amount of damage reduction. Perfect Temper would be all-res once, damage reduction twice. This is pretty much good enough. If I die too much, I'll probably go with the perfect version, but also, unfortunately, Masterworking has kind of sort of hated me. Well, okay, not really. I got some very, very good ones, but I used up my luck on those, and I haven't found the motivation to farm more materials to try to go for double damage reduction and max all-res. Speaking of, Gloves of the Illuminator, crit is the best temper, with so many ranks to Fireball. That's the okay thing, but realistically, you want crit or attack speed. You don't need extra mana. I happen to get 3 tempers on crit. I keep saying tempers, and I mean masterwork. Whenever I say temper in this video, unless it is specifically talking about a temper, just assume that it is masterwork. I honestly don't know why the terminology is so weird, but it is. Blizzard things. Then here, the Snow-Veiled Pants. You absolutely want the Snow-Veiled aspect. Number 1, it's extra unstoppable from Ice Armor. And number 2, 25% damage reduction when it's active. It should basically always be active, so permanent 25 DR. Then, these are actual tempers here. For a Lucky Hit Stun, technically it can be either Stun, Immobilize, Slow, or Freeze. But personally, I think that Stun and Freeze are the strongest, so you want one on Pants, one on Boots. And the other one is defensive of your choice if you're not using Ice Nova, which my setup does not. Then Warmth is a pretty good one for some consistent healing. Next up, Boots. Again, an actual temper for chance to freeze and movement speed. And perfect masterwork on the intelligence. I have another pair of boots that has almost perfect stats. It's also in max life movement speed, except movement speed's a greater affix. I keep saying to myself, I'll redo the masterwork. Aha, I remembered. I will redo the masterwork. And then I keep not doing it. So someday I might redo it and use my super shiny boots. Or maybe in the next build. Staff of Endless Rage. You want as many masterworks as possible on the Fireball. You want that absolutely maxed out. Then having things like chance for Fireball to cast twice, intelligence, really, really good. This is very much a priority item when it comes to masterworking. Get those Fireball ranks up because that is a lot of damage. I'm pretty sure each time that you hit it and get the extra ranks, so going from 6 to 8 to 12, it's like 5 to 10% damage depending on how many ranks you have everywhere else on your gear. Then I finally, this took so long, got Devouring Blaze, also hit 2 of the Masterworks on Devouring Blaze, which I'm pretty sure means after I take it up just a couple more ranks, I will actually get it to 5. That's going to be really sweet. And I'm going to be very sad if I don't end up getting it to 5 and then learn that I could have just left it at 4 because I didn't bother to do the math ahead of time. But also, I was trying to roll for something else rather than the lucky hit. I decided, you know what, the lucky hit feels really good. That lucky hit chance up above, it's not bad. Attack speed would have been better, but I don't have attack speed on it, and I'm not changing it. If you're wondering why I have the crit strike damage instead of pyromancy skill crit strike damage as the temper, That's because I'm thinking of using this amulet for a different build, so I wanted something generic, and I'm pretty sure the odds aren't too far off, plus I hit it, so it doesn't matter. And I also use the 3 curses aspect here. I've gone back and forth between this and Stormswell. This just felt a little bit more impactful to me. Stormswell is also very good and very consistent. Next up, Ring of Starless Skies, where, again, I used up all of my luck by hitting crit chance, crit chance, crit chance. There are no rolls on this. It's just very good. It provides a lot of damage and massively reduces the cost of your fireball. So if you get it, use it. And if you don't, use another ring. Last up, Telrasha's Iridescent Loop. I ended up hitting 1 cooldown reduction, which is pretty good. Luckily, with how much I have from my Shaco, I don't super feel the difference at this point, but I definitely feel the up to 80%, though it's very rarely 80. Usually it's 60% total increased damage that I have up pretty much all the time. So that's the gear. That's the very couple tempers on my very few legendary items, the very few aspects on my very few legendary items. Oh yeah, concussive strikes here. Daze, it's an extra crowd control, and it's 20% increased damage to dazed enemies. You know, a fun little multiplier that also has defensive benefits. And the big difference between the previous version of a build and the one that I'm playing right now is, of course, the 3 mythic uniques. Defensively, they have a absolutely phenomenal impact in the build. And I would say Harlequin Crest or Shaco, absolutely massive impact in terms of the damage. This was Compass 7 is sketchy. I put it on immediately. Compass 7, super chill. I can relax. I can hit my buttons. I can watch something on my other monitor. And then I just watch the loot pile up. Now, like I said in the last build, I started this one because in Season 0, I was sad that the Fireball unique sucked. And I just wanted to play a Fireball build. I'm really glad it worked out. Watching the fireballs bounce across the screen and explode stuff was nice and satisfying, exactly as I always hoped it would be. Now don't get me wrong, the build does have some frustrating moments, especially before you get the mythic uniques. If you forget to hit a defensive, you can get exploded. And honestly, hitting some of the crit stuff, especially trying to get the double crit or the chest piece, for whatever reason, the master working on that just did not want to cooperate. I think I burned like 100 million gold in reverting when it went damage reduction, res, damage reduction, res. It's like, no, I have so much res. I don't need res. I need anything that is not res. Please hit any of the other modifiers. And that was only on the 2nd, not the 3rd stage of masterworking. The 3rd, I'm just so glad it hit move speed the first try. That made me so happy. Also, the single target damage was a little bit disappointing, especially when I was doing Infernal Horde 8. Never enough to be a problem in terms of doing tormented bosses, even not a problem in terms of carrying friends through tormented bosses. When I was doing Infernal Hordes 8, the single target damage absolutely felt lackluster. It meant that enemies were staying alive for longer and longer, and the longer enemies live, the more likely you're to make a mistake with your defensives, and therefore, the more likely you are to be exploded. But if you don't look at this as the best be-all, do-everything build that there ever was, and instead look at it as this is the build you start the season with, and you roll into a different build that uses most of the same items on Sorceress, because this defensive framework is basically identical across a dozen other builds, then it's super awesome. In fact, it was the best season start that I've ever had in Diablo IV. Now, with that said, if you want a quick reference, I'm going to make a planner over on Maxroll. I'll toss it up in my Discord. But if you want to know more, you really want a full guide rather than just a quick reference, then head over to Maxroll. Northwar has a guide. Some of the choices are a little bit different. So what I'm saying is, I'm sure Northwar's version is better than mine. Now, if you're looking to start the season for yourself, do check out my starter version of a build. And if you want to know how to get compasses or farm Infernal Hordes, I'm working on a how to farm video, and I already have a how to get compasses out. Or if you want something really different, check out my first impressions video on my 2nd channel for the game Beyond These Stars, a cozy little city builder that I quite enjoyed. Links to those will be up in the card and down below. Before I go, I want to leave you with a question. What's one skill that you wanted to play in the past in either Diablo IV, Diablo III, or any other game, and it just didn't work? And did you ever get an opportunity to play it after a patch fixed things? Let me know some of those stories down in the comments below. Of course, before I go, a special thanks to my patrons and channel members for the continued support. For as low as $1 a month, you cannot make videos just like this one possible. Link to support is down below. And a big thanks to everyone who watched to the end of the video. I'm glad you enjoyed my ramblings about the build that I played and how I ended up refining it. So, while I'm not sure what I'm going to play next, I've been having fun with this season of Diablo IV, and I look forward to sharing it with you whatever it is.